Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we have some Jaguar-centric news came out yesterday. Wanted to wait a day to record just so we got the actual numbers and could really break this down better. But the Jaguars yesterday managed to extend cornerback Tyson Campbell, one of the many good draft picks from the 2021 draft class. So we're going to talk about the value of this contract, the cap hits, kind of how much money's pushed down the road at this point, because I think that's a big topic of conversation that a lot of moves play into, including this one itself. And just really my thoughts on this deal and whether this was good for Jacksonville, bad for Jacksonville. I think there's a little bit of debate to be had with Tyson Campbell because, well, he had a bad season last year. There are very good excuses for why that happened. There were some very good moments in 2022, and I think this is a guy that when you look at his career and you look at what he has done when he's healthy, he could arguably be one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. I think he could be up towards the top of that list. Now, I also think it's a crowd room talking about how many good cornerbacks there are in the NFL. I think it's something that changes quite a bit. It's almost kind of like running back, right? But I think he is a guy that can get up towards the top of that list. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first and foremost, we're going to look into the cap numbers here. So I've got this pulled up on Spot Rack. I've also got our sheet here where we've got all the cap hits for players, APYs, kind of break down spending, how much money is pushed down the road, and all those important things. But to get into the deal, this is a $76.5 million contract, spans the course of 4 years, going from 2025 to 2028, and this will start next year. So this season, his final year of his rookie deal, the cap number will change slightly. It's a difference of about $1 million in total. They're going to be paying him that much more, and that's fine, right? A lot of cap room right now. The Jaguars have a ton of wiggle room at this moment. Now, that does not necessarily mean the cap situation is super healthy. What it means is that there's a lot of money pushed down the road, and the bank account looks pretty good at this moment. And so Jacksonville still has that, and they have the ability to not really have to worry too much about a signing bonus here, given how much money they have right now. But that'll be spread over this season and the years to follow. You can see for cap hits, these cap hits are going to be prorated. So you're going to have a lot more money in the future. You have void years once again, something we have seen become a staple of this front office. 2029, 2030, they will have roughly $7 million that will go against the cap in those seasons. So this year, you're looking at $5 million, not a huge difference from what we had at around 4. And then you're going to go from 8 up to 10.5. And then you're looking at numbers around 24 for that 2027 and 2028 seasons. So, you know, that $19 million mark, to talk about that for a moment, I was hoping that Jacksonville would be able to maybe pull off signing Tyson Campbell to a cheap deal this offseason in the hopes that they're taking a risk and trying to gamble that they can save some money. And my thoughts were that this would probably fall around 16.5 to 17 million overall. And those numbers ended up being a little bit off. Maybe it could have been less if they had done this immediately at the start of the offseason. That was, of course, never super likely. But yet a guy like Jalen Johnson, who got a pretty big extension at the position, got paid roughly the same amount. And so I think that kind of set a precedent for where Tyson was going to land at the end of the day. But like we said at the start, you go back, you look at his performance in 2022, and there's a little bit of inconsistency in here. You see games that, you know, they might be graded low, but like the game against the Raiders here, gets a 44.9. That looks terrible, right? But for context, like he had a really bad first half, but he shut down Devontae Adams in the second half of that game, and that was a good Devontae Adams playing against him. He had impressive moments in 2022. This is a player who is phenomenal in coverage. He is a guy who's been able to generate turnovers, had 3 turnovers that season, only 1 this last year, but given he was injured, given that was a factor. He's been a good run defender throughout the course of his career. This is something that's going to be really important to this Ryan Nielsen defense. And as a tackler, yeah, you don't see a great grade here for 2022. But even with injury, and playing a decent amount of snaps, 589 on the season. He was very good in run defense. He was usually a positive for Jacksonville. And I think for a lot of top corners, you just don't see them always be that well-rounded. And that is something that stands out about Tyson Campbell and isn't really talked about as much by people as really what it should be. But this is a guy who has the overall potential to be good at really everything at the position, and not only good, but great at the end of the day. There's not a whole lot of limitations we're talking about with him. So could Tyson be worth this money? I think he will, and I think he could, but I would make that bet. And so I agree with this move for Jacksonville. I think it's the right decision. I think it's important to get these guys locked down. I will say, Andre Cisco is another name I feel almost the exact same about. If not, potentially would have been a higher target than Tyson Campbell for me. I look at him as a player who's going to be taking a big step forward this year, hopefully staying healthy, but this is a really good defense for Cisco to play under. He has had a phenomenal career for Jacksonville so far. He's been a guy who stepped up in big moments. He should be next on the list. This is a name that I think Jacksonville needs to lock down before we get into the regular season. But those are two guys that I think Jacksonville needs to keep around. They got one done, and I think it's a good deal. Ideally, of course, would you like to have saved a little bit more? Yeah, for sure. But it doesn't always happen that way. And so ultimately, I think this is a good deal. But final thing we'll wrap up on, I just want to give you guys a look at numbers as far as, how much is Jacksonville spending a year now, given this is a big extension. This is a big part of what could have been next offseason that's taken care of early. And then how much are we pushing down the road? Because this contract will add on to that issue. Now, of course, this provides benefits right now. There's more cap flexibility. You have these smaller cap hits, as we mentioned here, with 5, 8, and 10.5 million for this year through the next 2. Beyond that, that's good, right? But there's consequences down the road, and that's something Jacksonville has to deal with. This is a team that, and Shad Khan has alluded to it, this is a team that needs to draft better. This is a team who needs to be able to develop talent that they have and get value out of those rookie contracts. They've done that to an extent, but to be a top competitor and contender in the AFC and in the entire NFL, they have not really reached that level that you want to see. But getting into the numbers now. So, as you see, 2024, this is actually better as far as how much they push down the road because they get a little bit out of the way. Just given the nature of the signing bonus, there was no way they were going to really get under the original cap number, but not really a huge deal. You're spending, and I haven't really updated the average per year for 2024 because this is a year that's set, right? It is the value of that rookie contract. Once you get into 2025, that's where I'm going to evaluate in that this player is worth that $19.125 million a year. But for this year, we're not going to do that with him. He's worth the average of his rookie contract. Once you get into 2025, which you're carrying about $123 million over of cap hits that you've pushed down the road, this is money that you have essentially paid for 2024 and years previously that is going against the cap in 2025 and beyond for no purpose for those seasons. But in 2025, you see this number gets higher. It's up to $150 million at this point. Tyson Campbell extension gets it to that number. You also, at the same time, have to note that the cap space situation is good, right? This is still a time where Jacksonville is enjoying those small cap hits. It's going to be maybe 2026, 2027, where that starts to change for the team. But you see, ultimately, cap hits are not a huge deal that season. They have room for flexibility. If they want to make more moves, they can absolutely do that. But you also see at the same time, look at the average spending per year, you're up to $254 million at that point. Now, this still factors in Trevor Lawrence on the value of a fifth-year option. So I want to note that. So this is not $55 million being put into that. That will rise that next season. You also have Andre Cisco, who's going to be a free agent at that time. I do not believe there are many other huge names to really factor in as far as players who would be moving on. Cam Robinson actually would be one. Almost forgot him there. But you don't really have a ton of starters that are leaving that season. So you can still feel good about this number. It's not far off what you want the mark to be at. When you get to 2026 now, given the Tyson Campbell extension, which, like I said, I absolutely support this. I don't see a problem with doing it now, and I think it's the right decision. Your average spending per year, it goes down a little bit, but you've got a lot more players that are going to be getting re-signed at this point that you're going to need to bring back. You start to have these void years come in with guys like Brandon Scherf, Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk. These are two big names you're going to have to bring back. You've got 32 players that are counting against this cap hit aside from the void contracts, and you're already over 200 million. So ultimately, what we've kind of talked about in the past with the salary cap, and this is still the same with the Tyson Campbell extension, is that this team has to be able to prove now that they can develop the talent that they have in-house and the talent that they acquire through the draft. This is not a team that, even if the cap numbers look good, should be spending right now. It is not a good idea for them. And ultimately, to be able to build through the draft is not really, if they keep a lot of these players, it's not necessarily even going to set them into a better situation. It's more so going to sustain it because of the amount of players that Jacksonville has committed to. So it has to be the plan to keep building through the draft, to keep building through talent acquisition that doesn't involve just paying out massive amounts of money. And Tyson Campbell is an example of that. You look at the past 3 years of his career, he's been a very good player for Jacksonville. He's only been paid like $2-3 million a year. That's really good for the team. That's the value in finding talent through the draft. And so, kudos to them for drafting him. Credit to Trent Baalke for what he did there. I guess credit to he who shall not be named as well, the former head coach before that. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I think it's a good deal. Happy to see it. I'm glad it's done, especially before training camp. And hopefully we'll see another certain person get extended very soon. His name starts with Andre. It ends with Cisco. So that's all I've got for you guys, though. Appreciate you watching. We're going to have more Jaguars content coming up here soon. It's been kind of a dead month, but training camp's kicking off. Preseason's coming just around the corner, so we'll definitely have content coming up for the season. So thanks for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.